Transforming Moments by Gcina Mhlope. I was 17 years old and feeling very unsure of myself. With my schoolwork, I was doing exceptionally well, and most teachers at the high school liked me, or they seemed to. My essays were the example of good work, and they would be read to the whole class. I was probably proud of myself, even though I didn't really give it any serious thought. Somehow, it didn't do much for my confidence or give me any self-love. I thought I was very ugly, and the fact that my hair was so hard to manage didn't make things easier. I used to describe it as dry grass in winter, and after a while I stopped combing it. I'd wash it and dry it, get dressed in my black skirt and white shirt, which were not as nice as other girls, and I'd be on my way to school. To top it all, I had knock knees and big feet. I was just ugly and awkward. I hated myself. And, my God, I sat in the front desk, Miss Ugly, top of the class. Our school was one of the biggest high schools in the Eastern Cape, and we had a great school choir that simply collected trophies. I remember Bulelwa's voice every time I think of our choir. I used to close my eyes and enjoy listening to her sing. I don't know how many times I wished I had a tape recorder so I could tape her and be sure to listen to her all my life. And I must say, I felt great on those rare occasions when Bulelwa would come and study with me under the black wattle tree near the teachers' cottages. I loved that spot. And I also remember that Bulelwa stood by me when some girls in our dormitory would tease me about boys. They knew I was not very interested in boys, and they would go on, "But who would want to go out with her? She doesn't even try to look good." I remember this good-looking boy from Port Elizabeth who played rugby. It was half through the year, and he still didn't have a girlfriend. He was the star of our rugby team. I knew his name, and I'd heard lots about how good he was, but I didn't really know him. I was not one to go to the sports field. I was forever buried in my books. I read all the prescribed books for my year, and then I read any other book or newspaper or magazine. I read love stories by Barbara Cartland, Catherine Cookson. I read James Baldwin. I read so much you'd think that was the only thing that kept me alive. By the time the teacher came to certain books, I had long finished them, and I wished we'd move on to something I didn't know. Boys in my class didn't like me very much, except when they needed help with schoolwork. In the girls' dormitory, my bed was at the far corner from the entrance, far enough from the matron too, so long after the lights were switched off, my deep voice would be heard droning away, doing what we had termed coughing. I used to cough out chapters and chapters of our set books and history to my classmates who'd left it till too late to do their schoolwork, and the big test was on Monday or so. While I helped them out, it also helped me to do the coughing. It also helped to revive my memory, because I had read the book and then carried on to read others that had nothing particular to do with the syllabus. Some girls were forced to be my part-time friends for this reason. But then came one day when we were rehearsing a new school play, and the boy from Port Elizabeth walked up to me and told me that he loved me and wished I tried to love him too. Well, I thought he was crazy. What did a good-looking boy like that want with me? And besides, I went to that school to study, not to sleep with boys. I told him so. He tried to convince me that he didn't particularly mean to rush things. I didn't have to sleep with him. He just liked me, and he wanted to be my boyfriend. He said he really wanted to spend time with me, and we could have good times together, talking and reading if that's what I wanted. I asked him to please leave me alone. Well, the boy didn't leave me alone, but many girls did. They thought he was too good for me. They claimed he was a city boy and should therefore go for a city girl. There were many remarks too that I was ugly and didn't have any fashionable clothes. Many girls looked the other way when I walked past or towards them, and many unkind remarks were whispered behind my back. At first, it annoyed me. I told whoever would listen that I didn't want anything to do with a handsome city boy. They could have him. And then I began to find it funny. I looked at the girls who hated me, and I wondered what would happen if I decided to accept the rugby star as my boyfriend. Sometimes I laughed alone as I imagined what they could be whispering about me. And then I thought, Well, he's not blind. He can see that I'm ugly. He can see I don't have any fashionable clothes. He can see I read too much. I thought, fine, I'll go out with him. He had chosen an unsuitable girl and set the whole school on fire. My English teacher thought it was really funny. He congratulated me for causing such a stir. It turned out that Sizwe was a lovely person, and we'd become quite good friends by the time he left the school at the end of that year. I carried on with my schoolwork and continued to please my sister in Johannesburg. She was the one to pay for my education. I could imagine her face glowing when she received my good results, and I wished I could see her then. I was doing my Standard 9, and we'd just come back for the second semester after the winter holidays. Life was all right. Everything was going the same as it always had. I'm not quite sure how it started, but as time went on, I had the feeling that the minister liked me. But then, maybe I don't have to explain such a lot. I think everyone has somebody in their lives who seems to like them, just like that. Sure, I was always well behaved in church, and I was one of the 3 girls who cut and arranged flowers for the church vases every Sunday morning. I had been kicked out of the school choir because my voice was not too good. I left. That also added to my Miss Ugly top of the class image, but the minister insisted that I be in the church choir despite my protestations that my voice was ugly. He said my voice was strong and resonant, not ugly. That's the first time I heard the word resonant, and I liked it. So I joined the church choir. Then there was this Friday afternoon. A group of lazy girls was walking back from school. The winter sun seemed as lazy as we were. We had just walked past the minister's house when a young boy ran up to us. He said the minister wanted to see me. I went with him, and I was about to walk into the kitchen when the minister himself came out and gave me fast instructions that I must go and get my weekend bag packed because he was going to visit his family and I was coming with him. I stood there at the top of the stairs, open-mouthed, unable to move or speak. He looked at me and laughed out loud. He told me we had less than an hour to go, so I should run. Without a word, I turned and took the 5 steps in one big jump, running at top speed, clutching my books tightly to my chest. I realized that I was not alone in the world. Everyone was staring at me. I tried to pull myself together and put a hand across my lips to hide the big grin. Once in my dormitory, I didn't know what to take or leave. I was not exactly used to going on weekends. I quickly got out of my school uniform and into my best dress. I ran to the bathroom to wet my hair a little so I could try to comb it. It was too painful, but I sort of tugged and patted it down with my hand. When I thought it felt better, I went and got my plastic bag with a few necessities for the weekend. Then I realized I'd forgotten my nightie. I jumped to get it from under my pillow. People were following me around but too proud to ask what was going on, and I was not going to say a word till they asked. Nusisa grabbed me by the arm as I was just walking out the door. "Aren't you going to tell us where you are going?" That opened it up for everyone to ask me questions all at the same time. "I'm going with Father Fikeni to visit his family for the weekend. He said I must run." And with that, I pulled my arm free and walked quickly out of the gate. The drive to Tsolo was relaxing, with the sun setting ahead of us and me dreaming away in the back seat. The minister and his wife sat in front, and they seemed to be at peace with themselves. Mrs. Fikeni was a beautiful lady who didn't talk too much. Many times in church I would look at her and wish that some angel would come into the church and ask me what I wanted. I knew exactly what I would ask for. I wanted to be as beautiful as the minister's wife. That night I went to bed at about 10ish after the evening prayer. I fell asleep very quickly. Maybe I was too tired from all my excitement, but then I was still excited when I woke up the next morning to realize that no bell rang for me to wake up or to go to the dining hall and to go to school. I had a shower and went to help out in the kitchen. I liked the fact that I was not treated like some special guest who couldn't even do the dishes with them. I felt very much at home. We were all sitting on the veranda drinking some tea a short while after breakfast, and I was sitting next to the minister's wife. She was knitting a huge jersey with red and blue stripes. It looked so big I doubted it was hers, but she said yes, it was. She just liked it that way, long and big like a coat. I was sitting there just staring at her fast-moving hands, and to look at her face was something else. It was as relaxed and beautiful as ever. She hardly looked at her knitting, except when she ran out of wool or when she had to change color. We were sitting like that when the minister stood up and stretched his arms and said that it was time to go. Time to go where? I half-heartedly wondered, but I carried on looking at the knitting hands. When he didn't move, I looked up. Maybe I was feeling his eyes on me. He said maybe I should go with him. He said he had a surprise for me. I looked around at the eyes around me, but none seemed to give me a clue. I stood up and followed him inside the house. He sort of explained that he was going to this meeting and he thought I'd like to see what goes on in such meetings. I did not know what to say, so I smiled and got ready to go. The meeting was held at a nearby village, and it was at the chief's place. It was very well attended. Looking at all the people sitting on the grass, on rocks or wooden stools near the cattle kraal, I decided the whole village, everyone was there. We were late, but no one seemed to be that concerned. They made space for us to sit while the speaker carried on and the people listened. I remember that he was saying something about cattle being allowed to go into the mealie fields at the same time. Something like all the people should come to an agreement and this should happen after everyone has finished reaping their crops. It was somewhere along those lines, and more people participated in the discussion that followed. But my problem was that I didn't have much to do with it all. I sat there quietly, trying to be as interested as I could, and then this man, tall with big shoulders and a very dark face. He stood up with a leap, his eyes flashing this way and that, like he was on the alert for something. He wore this beautifully made dark red hat with some beads and a long black leather skirt, the front part just above the knees and the back much longer and flowing behind. Also he had this strong looking short stick, and then the tip was made longer by a white oxtail attached to it. He was holding it in one hand, and in the other he was holding a biggish red, almost blanket-like cloth thrown casually over his arm. Everyone sat up expectantly when the man stood up. The minister looked at me with a big smile. I think the look in his eyes told me, this is it now, enjoy. The brightly dressed man started by singing the praises of the chief's family, and then about the chief's achievements, about the village people, great heroes of the past and of the present. His use of language was pure and flowing, and so were his movements. He leaped forward and hit the ground with his oxtail stick, hardly making a sound. He had some people unconsciously imitating him. He would be praising the one minute, and the next he was reflective and critical. I had heard of Imbongi, a praise poet, but I'd never dreamt that I'd see one in action. I was staring open-mouthed. Even today, looking back, I still don't know exactly how to describe the feeling I had then. I only remember that when the man had finished and people moved forward to congratulate him, I knew I was too tired to even clap my hands or join in the ululation and whistles. I just sat there and in my dreamy mind saw myself in a kind of similar attire, doing what I had just seen the man do. I made my decision there and then that I was also a praise poet. That was a beautiful moment, to think of myself as such. I shook a few people's hands, and the minister introduced me to the chief, who thanked him for coming and laughingly asked what I was doing at such a meeting. And then the poet came to greet Father Fikeni. After their longish chat, I was introduced to him as a very good student, during which time I was frozen and dumb from disbelief and God knows what else. To feel the poet's hot, sweaty hand holding mine, I felt baptized as a poet too. I think I wanted to say something clever, but all I could do at the moment was smile and fidget with my buttonholes. He went on to talk with other people who called him Gcina. It was Monday afternoon, and I was lying on my stomach at my favorite corner under the black wattle trees when I wrote my first poem. I've never had a child, but the great feeling that swept over me was too overwhelming for words. Maybe that's how people feel when they have their first baby. I don't know. I sat up and read it out loud. I liked the sound of my own voice. I liked to hear the poem. I put the paper down and ran my fingers on my face to feel my features, the smile that wouldn't leave my face, my nose, my cheekbones, my eyes, my ears, everything just felt fine. My voice sounded like it was a special voice, made especially to recite poems with dignity. Resonant. Was that it? That's the day I fell in love with myself. Everything about me was just perfect. I collected my books and the towel I was lying on, stood up, and stretching my limbs I felt tall and fit. I felt like jumping and laughing until I couldn't laugh anymore. I wanted tomorrow to come so I could go buy myself a new notebook to write my poems in. A woman praise poet. I'd never heard of one, but what did it matter? I could be the first one. I knew Father Fikeni would agree with me. I couldn't wait to see his face when I read him my poem. Across the fence a big red cock flapped its wings and crowed loudly at me in agreement too.